Hello subs and doms, this video is going to be a tier list for Mavuika's best weapons. We're just going to rank all of the weapons based around which one of them are going to give Mavuika the best damage. It's going to be kind of a simple DPS really, so hopefully this video won't be too complicated. But first of all, let's explain what she needs on a weapon first. So yeah, as I said before, she mainly would be like a main DPS, sometimes sub DPS, but she mainly just going to be like a normal sub or main DPS. That means she scales with attack, she crits and stuff like that, so her damage is going to be normal. That means her weapon options are generally going to be just your basic DPS options with some twists. So yeah, what she needs on a weapon is first going to be the base attack, especially for a main DPS role. Her multipliers are just going to be crazy, so a high base attack weapon is going to be pretty good. The second thing she's going to need is going to be crit rate, normally like any DPS. Crit rate or crit damage, just crit in general. She's going to be able to crit, so any weapons that can give you more crit are going to be pretty good. And then the final thing you're going to need is probably just attack and elemental mastery buffs. With attack, I mean attack percentage in general. That's still going to be a very good buff on her, even though she has a lot of attack buffs from her kit, but it's still going to be pretty good. With elemental mastery, that only matters in like reaction teams, obviously, whether it's vape, melt, and stuff like that, which to be fair are most of her teams, so you probably just want to build some elemental mastery on her. And if you get it from your weapon, then it's not going to be too bad, but it's definitely not going to be the high top of priorities. And then finally, damage bonus in general is going to be good too, whether it's pyro damage bonus, general damage bonus, it's going to be pretty good too. So yeah, those are mainly the stats you'd want to go for. There's not really a huge difference between them in priorities, but I would say this is the main priority order you'd want to go for. Knowing that, let's move on to the tier list and rank the weapons. Alright, so first of all, starting off with the first Shadow, I'm going to just go through the 3-star options because of the low base attack. None of them are really going to be good options. So yeah, first Shadow, just D tier. Bloodstain, just for the elemental mastery, I'd say C tier. White Iron, defense is D tier. Wards, elemental mastery, C tier. The Bay Club, attack, probably like low C tier. And then Skyrider is just D tier. Now, moving on to the 4-star options. Starting off with the Favonius Greatsword. It's just an energy recharge weapon and it gives energy to your team. I guess it can be usable to generate energy in like a sub DPS build, but I definitely wouldn't really recommend it at all because she just won't really take any advantage out of the energy recharge substat, which is most of this weapon. Her burst doesn't really charge with energy, so yeah, I'd say it's probably like low C tier and only for sub DPS build. For a main DPS build, it's definitely D tier. The Bill is just HP, probably like D tier. Sacrificial, D tier too. You won't really need her skill to double up, and the energy recharge is completely useless. Royal Greatsword is just the attack and then the useless Royal passive. I'd say it's probably high C tier just for the attack and the high base attack. Brain Slasher can be pretty good, but as I said before, it depends on the team just because of the elemental mastery. In reaction teams like, I don't know, vape, melts and stuff like that, Persian, it can be pretty decent, otherwise it's not as good. I'd put it like B tier as a free-to-play option, but just for the right teams. Prototype Archaic, I'd say same thing as the Royal Greatsword. The passive is kind of whatever, but just for the attack, I put it like high C tier. White Blind is just defense, so it's going D tier. You have the Blacklift Slasher. It has a crit damage substat, and then it can give you attack from the passive, which is pretty good. But the thing is, it's just a Blacklift passive. You never know when it's going to be activated and when it's not going to be, so it's going to be pretty inconsistent. I'd put it B tier. It can be A tier if the passive is activated, but you don't really want to count on that. So yeah, I think B tier is probably the right place. Serpent Spine can give you crit rate, and then it can also give you a lot of damage bonus from passive. You just need to stay on field. For DPS build, it can be super good for Mavuika, but it's also not very consistent because as soon as you take damage, you're going to lose stacks, which is not always maintainable. Probably going to take damage from time to time. With full stacks, this weapon can be super good, like high A tier, maybe S tier. With refinements, it's going to be even like much better, definitely S tier when you have like the passive activated. But in general, as I said, it's not as consistent if you're not playing it with like a shielder and stuff like that. So I'd say it's going to be low A tier. That's probably going to be the right place. It can be S tier, but it's not a consistent weapon, so I don't really like it as much. Lithic Blade, just attack. You probably won't really be playing it with leeway characters, so maybe like 1 max. So I'd say C tier too. Snow Tom, physical damage, so it's going to D tier. Luxurious Sea Lord is just attack, but it's going to have a low base attack, and it's going to increase your elemental burst damage, which is pretty decent. I'd say it's probably like high C tier too. I'd say that's probably the right place. Low base attack is not really going to be as good. Katsuragikuri, it's just an energy recharge and then some energy. Probably D tier, I would say. Machaira Aquamarine, it's elemental mastery, and then it can give you attack from your elemental mastery, and it can also buff your team pretty well. I'd say it's a pretty decent weapon, especially for a sub DPS Mavuika. For main DPS, not really so much, but for a sub DPS, it's gonna be pretty good. It's gonna be supporting the rest of your party members, and you're gonna gain elemental mastery, which is pretty good in like vape teams and stuff like that. And then also you can get some attack, which is pretty decent. It's not bad. I'll put it a low B tier, but only for sub DPS Mavuika. For main DPS, DPS, it's not as good. Mailed Flower is just Elemental Mastery 2 with a high base attack, and then it's going to increase your attack and Elemental Mastery from the passive. With the refinements, it can be super good, especially as a free-to-play weapon, especially for sub DPS Mavuika. For main DPS, not so much, but for sub DPS, I'd say it's pretty decent. So I think I put it a low A tier too, but mainly for sub DPS Mavuika, I repeat. For main DPS, it's probably going to be like around B tier. Talking Stick is just crit rate with a high base attack, and then it can give you some attack. I'll probably put a low A tier too, to be honest. It's not going to be bad, especially for 4-star weapon. Tidal Shadow is just attack, and then you just gain more attack when you're healed. Pretty decent. I'd probably say it's B tier. It's better than the rest here at C tier, because the passive is going to be pretty useful. There's more attack, so yeah, I'd say it deserves B tier. That's D tier. I don't know what that is. Portable Power Saw is just HP, so it's going D tier. Fruitful Hook, that's just the plunging thing. I don't know if it's gonna work in like a Shan Yu team or whatever, but in general, it's probably not gonna be right. So I just put it like low C tier just for the attack. And then finally, you have the Earth Shaker, high base stack and then attack substat, and then it can increase your elemental skills damage if you trigger a pyro related reaction, which is pretty good. It's probably B tier too, I would say. It's not too bad. Now moving on to the 5-star options, automatically we're gonna see them being generally better just because of the high base stack, which she likes a lot. But yeah, starting off with the Skywer, super high base stack but a completely useless substat with energy recharge. The passive is just kind of whatever. It's just gonna give you some damage bonus, pretty small, and then some extra damage. I don't really think it's gonna be as good. The only thing going for it is gonna be the high base stack, so I think it's probably B tier. That's probably the right place. Voice Greystone is just a huge attack stat stick. Honestly, I think it's a little too much attack. You're probably gonna hit some diminishing returns with that. It's like a huge attack substat and then high base stack and then more attack from the passive. It's not gonna be bad though in general. I'd say it's probably gonna be an A tier weapon too. We've got Song of the Broken Pines, super high base stack with 49 at level 1. Physical damage substat, which is not gonna be useful unfortunately. The passive is gonna give you more attack just when you hit opponents with your normal attacks or charge attacks, which is pretty good. And then it can increase your normal attack speed and even more attack if you have the 4 things. It can be pretty good. The only bad thing about it is gonna be the substat. It's gonna be completely useless, but it's still a kind of usable weapon. So I think it's probably gonna be put like high B tier or low A tier. I put it like low A tier probably. That's gonna be right. The only bad thing is the physical damage substat, but other than that, it's just a huge attack stat stick too. Got the Unforged. It's gonna be pretty good, especially if you're shielded. So I put it like low A tier too. If you're not shielded, it's not gonna be as good though. So make sure you're using a shield with this weapon. Got the Red Horn, low base stack, but a huge crit damage substat. The passive is gonna increase your defense, and then it's gonna increase your normal and charge attacks based on your defense. You're not gonna be building defense on Mavuika, but it's still gonna increase them by a decent amount. So it's not gonna be bad. I think I probably put this weapon as like the top of A tier. It's definitely gonna be a very good weapon. We got Beacon of the Reed Sea, average base stack for 5-star, but it's gonna be pretty high. Crit rate as a substat, which is pretty good. The passive is just an attack stat stick, but the weapon in general is gonna be pretty good. You know, good base attack, good substat with a crit rate, and then a huge attack increase from the passive, which you're probably gonna be able to take full advantage of. It's gonna be like 40% attack, and then some HP. So honestly, I think it deserves like S tier. This is probably as good as it gets for her weapons in general, even for 5 stars. So yeah, I think it deserves S tier. Other than her signature, that's probably gonna be one of the best. Got the Verdicts, high base stack, and then the crit rate substat, pretty good too. You need to play her with a Geo for that, but if you are, it's gonna increase your attack by 20%, and then it's gonna increase your elemental skill damage by a huge amount actually, which is pretty good. It's probably gonna be much better in like a sub DPS team, but in general, it's also a super good weapon, and that's as good as it gets in general. So I think it also deserves S tier. I would put it S tier too. We have Kinish's weapon, Fang of the Mountain King, super high base attack, which is pretty good, and then the crit rate substat, it's gonna be pretty small, but that's also good. The passive is just gonna increase your elemental burst and skill damage by a decent amount actually, up to 60% if you can trigger the full stacks. So that weapon is gonna be super good for a sub DPS build. It's gonna be increasing your elemental skill damage, just a decent amount of your damage, and then your elemental burst damage, which is also a good amount of your damage. And with the high base stack and the crit rate, it's probably better than most weapons in a sub DPS build. So honestly, I think it deserves low S tier in general too, but mainly for sub DPS builds. For a main DPS build, it's probably gonna be like A tier or low A tier around that. For sub DPS, it's gonna be like high S tier. So average, I'd say it's low S tier. It's a good weapon in general too. But yeah, in general, it's gonna be a good weapon. Now I have her signature weapon. It's just super high base stack, crit rate as a substat, same thing as the Kinish's weapon. And then it's gonna increase your crit rate and attack by a huge amount basically. We're gonna review this weapon's separately if you want to see it on multiple characters, but it's definitely going to be a super good weapon on Mavuika. It's going to be much better than even S tier weapons by a decent amount, actually, probably around like 15 to 25%. But in general, it's definitely going to be the best slot weapon for her. So it's not going to be a bad investment if you're planning to play Mavuika for a long time. But yeah, as you guys can see, she has pretty decent free to play options here, like the middle flower and stuff like that, especially elemental mastery options. And if you have any of the 5 stars pretty much, they're probably going to do a good job. So yeah, I think to maximize her potential, she's not really fully free to play friendly, but you have decent free to play options. So yeah, I'd say she's a normal fair character in terms of weapons in free to playness, if that's a thing. But yeah, that was the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.